Mr. President, I'm down on the Senate floor here to try to pass two really important pieces of legislation for a great part of Alaska. And this is the Alaska Native community in my state. These are incredible, patriotic Americans. By the way, Alaska Natives serve at higher rates in the military than any other ethnic group in the country. They are great Americans. They add so much to our state. They are the first peoples of Alaska. And so in my state, it's almost about 20% of the population, Mr. President. So it's a population I care deeply about. We work closely with them on so many different issues across so many different areas. And so I like to legislate in the areas that matter to them. And we're going to do that, lately, and I'm going to try and stay positive here. I've given speeches on the Senate floor about this before. Some of my Democratic colleagues on the other side of the aisle have taken it out on the Alaska Native people in legislation, really kind of bad stuff. Now, I'm not going to be negative, but there has been this trend of a anti-Alaska Native bias on the other side of the aisle. It's been very disappointing, to be honest, Mr. President. It's been puzzling. But I'm hoping today these two bills that we're going to move forward that go to the heart of Alaska Native culture in one and Alaska Native patriotism in the other are going to be UC'd. I know my Republican colleagues have already passed on these. So the first piece of legislation, Mr. President, I want to bring up is what we call the Alaska's Right to Ivory Sales and Tradition. The acronym on that is the Artists Act. Now, let me give you a little bit of background on this. For thousands of years, Alaska Natives have responsibly harvested whales, walrus, other marine mammals from our northern seas. These animals are eaten, shared, honored, and no part of the animal goes to waste. They still do this tradition in my state. They have the right to do it under law. The bones, the ivory, the baleen, even all of those pieces are used for beautiful art. If you've had a chance to visit my office, you've seen the beautiful art that adorns the walls of my Senate office, carvings made from whale baleen, walrus tusks, crafted by Alaska Native artists. Mr. President, this is some of those beautiful art in America. It is deeply ingrained in Alaska's culture, the ability to make this art. It also provides important economic opportunity for our artists in many of these remote villages, artists who rely on the ability to sell these works to Alaskans and the hundreds of thousands of people who come to my great state to visit, who want to take home a piece of Alaska Native heritage. So it's a win-win-win for everybody, but it's an economic driver of a lot of small villages in my state. And by the way, Mr. President, carving, harvesting walrus ivory is completely legal under federal law. Federal regulations, federal law, there's no question about that. However, there's been some, I guess, well-intentioned laws from some states that in an attempt to ban African elephant ivory, which we all want to do that's not allowed in America, by the way, states have gone too far and cast this huge net and have said, you can't buy any ivory products anywhere, including Alaska Native products from Alaska walrus harvested. This really has hurt my state. People coming up from states that have banned all ivory say, I can't take that home. I can't buy it. Sorry. So, Mr. President, this is a simple bill. If a visitor wants to come buy some ivory earrings in Alaska by one of our great Alaska Native artists, and they bring them home to a state that has a ban on ivory, which is not sensible. Again, walrus ivory, not Alaskan or not African elephant ivory. We want to be able to say at the federal level, we should be able to do this. So that's what my Artists Act does. It prohibits states from banning the importation, sale, or possession of Alaska Native handicrafts made with walrus ivory. Environmental groups support it. By the way, the Biden administration supported this. It's straightforward, bipartisan legislation that recently, Mr. President, passed unanimously the Commerce Committee. So this is about as bipartisan as it gets. And Mr. President, what I want to do is to cut through the confusion that now exists with certain states and a lot of tourists in my great state, to affirm the right of the Alaska Native people to continue these centuries-old practices of sustainable, respectful ivory carving entirely within federal law, and to be able to make sure that's clarified across the country. So, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of calendar number 178, that's Senate 254, further that the committee reported substitute amendment be considered and agreed to, the bill as amended be considered, read a third time and passed, and that the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there an objection?
Reserving the right to object.
The senator from California.
So, Mr. President, to ask that the senator modify his request and the Senate proceed to the consideration of the following bills en bloc. Calendar item 178, Senate 254, and calendar item 169, Senate 318, that the committee reported substitute amendments be considered and agreed to en bloc, the bills as amended be considered, read a third time and passed en bloc, and that the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table all en bloc.
Does the senator so modify his request?
Yes, I agree to the modification.
The clerk will report the bills en bloc.
Calendar number 178 S254 to amend the Marine Mammal Protection Act of 1972 to protect the cultural practices and livelihoods of producers of Alaska Native handicrafts and marine mammal ivory products and for other purposes. Calendar number 169 S318 to require a plan to improve the cybersecurity and telecommunications of the U.S. academic research fleet and for other purposes.
Under the previous order, the committee reported substitutes are considered and agreed to. The bills as amended are considered read a third time and passed, and the motions to reconsider are considered made and laid on the table all en bloc.
Mr. President, I want to just let people know back home that means that bill, the artist bill that we've been trying to get moved for a long time, just passed the United States Senate. So I want to thank my colleague from California, my friend from California who has worked with me. By the way, on one of the other bills that just passed, I was a co-sponsor with Senator Padilla on that. So there's good Senate cooperation on these issues. Now, Mr. President, so that's an important issue for Alaska Native heritage, culture, artists, and now it's passed the Senate. So again, I want to thank Senator Padilla. Now, I hope we can move to a next bill that, to be honest, should even be easier, because the bill I'm going to try and pass right now passed the United States Senate in December, unanimously, already passed. So this should be a no-brainer. I hope my Senate colleague from California is on the floor here, ready to give this bill his full endorsement and not object to it. Mr. President, let me just talk about this bill briefly. Again, it already passed. It passed the House in July, so if we pass it right now, it's going to go to the President of the United States' desk for a signing. And this is a really big deal for my constituents. Here's what it is, Mr. President. I talked about what I call the special patriotism of Alaska Natives. They serve at higher rates in the military than any other ethnic group in the country. They had a situation when so many, and I mean thousands and thousands of Alaska Natives were serving in Vietnam, when a whole host of Americans didn't want to serve in Vietnam. Alaska Natives answered the call. So we have tens of thousands of Vietnam vets. And when they came home, like a lot of Vietnam vets, they were not treated well. That was horrible. Our country should apologize for the horrible treatment our Vietnam vets got. Let's face it, as Alaska Natives, a lot of people still discriminated against Alaska Natives back then. They weren't treated well in that regard either. And finally, Mr. President, a law had changed when they were overseas. Alaska Native people used to have a right starting in 1906 for a native allotment. That's 160 acres of land that if they could prove this is where their family raised them and hunted and fished, they could get that allotment, 160 acres. Well, when they were overseas fighting in Vietnam, that law changed. So here they are, serving their country when a lot of American males are avoiding service, and they get home and they're told, by the way, your allotment that you're supposed to be able to get, that you've wanted your whole life, that law changed and you can't do it anymore. Huge injustice. So, Mr. President, during the first Trump administration, I introduced legislation called the Alaska Native Vietnam Veterans Land Allotment Act, and it said, hey, if you were overseas or serving in the military and you came home and the ability to get your allotment extinguished, you shouldn't be penalized for fighting for your country. You get the extended time to get your allotment. So that bill passed. I was in the Oval Office when President Trump signed it. It was a great day for Alaskan Native Vietnam veterans, very patriotic. It was a 5-year program, Mr. President. Unfortunately, we had Secretary Haaland implement it. Secretary Haaland did not implement it. Secretary Haaland, when she went through her confirmation hearing, committed to me twice, Senator, I will make this a priority of mine to implement this bill. You know what she did, Mr. President? She didn't do anything. Shamefully, because radical left-wing environmental groups told her, we don't want anyone else getting land in Alaska, she did 40 allotments out of well over almost 3,000 available. She dragged her feet. She delayed it for 2 years. So the 5-year program has almost run out of time because Secretary of the Interior, Haaland, was more interested in appeasing radical left-wing environmental groups than she was getting Alaska Natives their allotment, which is what the law demanded. So this bill is very simple. Because of that delay, it changes 2 words in the already passed law. It says 5 years to 10 years. It's just a 5-year extension to a bill that everybody agrees with. These patriotic Alaska Native Vietnam vets deserve their allotments. And they shouldn't have to suffer because of Secretary Haaland's delay tactics. So, Mr. President, this bill has already passed the House. This bill passed the Senate unanimously in December. And I'm really hoping that my Democratic colleagues, respecting the indigenous Native people of my state and their valiant Vietnam service, will join with me in just passing it like we did in December. And then it'll go right to the President's desk, and we'll have 5 more years to implement this really important piece of legislation. So, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Energy and Natural Resources be discharged from further consideration of H.R. 410, and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration. Further, that the bill be considered read a 3rd time and passed, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there an objection?
Reserving the right to object.
The senator from California.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'm actually very glad and encouraged that we were able to find a bipartisan approach to the Commerce Committee bills that we just passed just a few minutes ago. Not just because I know it's important to my colleague from Alaska and to his constituents, but so that Native Alaskans know that this side of the aisle also supports them as well. But as it pertains to these bills, I think we need to find a similar bipartisan approach on the energy and natural resource bills that Senator from Alaska is suggesting that we approve by unanimous consent. I'm actually more than happy and eager to sit down with my colleague and the chair and ranking member of the committee to put together a larger package of bills to ensure that both Republican and Democratic priorities reach the President's desk and get signed into law. I think historically we've been successful at avoiding a piecemeal approach, instances where only one party's priorities or one chamber's priorities reach the President's desk and get signed into law. And so I look forward to continuing to work in that spirit, to continue the conversation with my colleague from Alaska to arrive at a balanced bipartisan package of bills and work together to advance them. Therefore, I must object at this time.
The objection is heard. Senator from Alaska.
Mr. President, I appreciate my colleague from California's cooperation on the first bill, the Artis Act. Little disappointed here on this one because, you know, it's a little bit of a delay tactic, but he certainly has my commitment to work with him to, if they need to pair this, to try to pair this. But I will say this. The 5 years of this bill expires at the end of this year, and we cannot, regardless if there's pairing or not pairing, we cannot let this bill expire. These great American patriots serve their country and deserve their allotment that they were unable to get during Vietnam. And then when we passed the bill, Secretary of Interior Holland purposely dragged her feet to make sure no Alaska Native or very few got their allotment. That was a disgrace. And so, Mr. President, my colleague from California, you have my commitment to work with you, but we got to get this done by the end of the year, before the end of the year, and get it on the President's desk. These great patriotic Americans deserve nothing less, and we can't delay much longer. I yield the floor.